The sound of hooves thundering past his ranch in the dead of night pulled Ethan Pierce from his bed, and when dawn broke across the Texas sky, he found her curled against a hay bale in his barn, trembling like a wounded animal with blood on her torn dress and terror in her eyes. He stopped in the doorway, his hand still gripping the rifle he had grabbed on his way out. The pale light filtering through the barn slats illuminated her small form, and he could see she was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair matted against her pale face. Her breathing came in short, panicked gasps, and when she saw him, she pressed herself harder against the hay as if she could disappear into it. Ethan lowered the rifle immediately, setting it against the wall. He held up both hands, palms out, trying to make himself appear less threatening. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and calm, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "I am not going to hurt you." She did not respond, just stared at him with wide eyes that seemed too large for her face. He could see the shivers racking her body, violent tremors that made her teeth chatter audibly in the quiet barn. Whatever had happened to her, it had been bad. Moving slowly, Ethan walked to the tack room and pulled down one of his heavy wool blankets. It was April 1882, and while the days in Alpine, Texas could get warm, the nights still carried a bitter chill that seeped into your bones. He approached her the way he would approach a frightened colt, taking his time, making no sudden movements. "I am going to give you this blanket," he said, holding it out. "You are freezing." She watched him with those haunted eyes, but did not reach for the blanket. After a moment, Ethan simply draped it over her shoulders, careful not to touch her directly. She flinched anyway, but then her hands came up to clutch the wool, pulling it tight around herself. Ethan backed up a few steps and sat down on an overturned bucket, giving her space. "My name is Ethan Pierce. This is my ranch. You are safe here." Still, she said nothing. But he could see she was listening, could see the way her breathing started to slow just a fraction. "I heard horses last night," he continued, speaking in that same steady voice, and sounded like trouble. "Were you running from someone?" Finally, she nodded. Just a tiny movement, but it was the first communication she had offered. "Are they still looking for you?" Another nod. Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his gut. He had been ranching alone outside Alpine for 3 years now, and while it was generally peaceful territory, he knew the kinds of men who rode through these parts. Outlaws, drifters, men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. The blood on her dress told him more than words could. "What is your name?" he asked gently. Her lips parted, and for a moment he thought she would not answer. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Rose. Rose Sullivan." "Rose." He repeated it, committing it to memory. "Are you hurt? Do you need a doctor?" She shook her head quickly, almost violently. "No doctor, please. They will find me." "Who will find you?" Rose pulled the blanket tighter, and fresh tears began streaming down her face. "The Garrett brothers. They killed my father. They killed him right in front of me, and then they took me. I have been their prisoner for 3 days. Last night when they were drunk and sleeping, I stole one of their horses and ran. I ran until the horse threw me, and then I ran on foot. I did not know where I was going. I just saw your barn and hid." Ethan felt rage kindle in his chest. The Garrett brothers. He knew of them, had heard the stories. A gang of 5 brothers who robbed stagecoaches and homesteads, leaving death in their wake. If they were looking for Rose, they would not give up easily, and if they found her here, they would kill him too. But looking at her terrified face, at the way she huddled in that blanket like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart, Ethan knew he could not turn her away, would not turn her away. "You are safe here," he said again, putting every ounce of conviction he possessed into the words. "I will not let them hurt you again." Rose looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. She saw a tall man in his late 20s with sun-weathered skin and dark blonde hair that needed a trim. His face was honest, open, with none of the cruelty she had seen in the Garrett brothers' eyes. When he met her gaze, she saw something there that made her chest tighten with an emotion she could not name. Safety. She saw safety. "Why would you help me?" she whispered. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," Ethan said. "I know you are running for your life. I know you have been through hell. That is all I need to know." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were different. Not tears of fear, but of overwhelming relief. For 3 days she had been certain she would die. And now, in this barn, with this stranger offering her protection, she felt the first flutter of hope. Ethan stood slowly. "Let me get you some water and food. When did you last eat?" "I do not remember," Rose admitted. Her voice was hoarse, strained from crying and screaming in the dry Texas air. He nodded and headed toward the barn door, then paused. "I'm going to close the barn doors and bar them, just in case. You stay hidden in here until I know it is safe. Do not come out no matter what you hear. Understand?" "Yes." Ethan stepped out into the early morning light, scanning the horizon. His ranch sat in a valley surrounded by rocky hills and scrub brush. He had good sight lines in all directions, which was one reason he had chosen this spot. If riders came, he would see them long before they reached his property. He went to the house and gathered supplies: bread, dried meat, a canteen of water, and his spare pistol. When he returned to the barn, Rose was still in the same spot, though she had wrapped the blanket more securely around herself. He handed her the food and water, and she drank deeply, coughing a little when she took too much too fast. Then she ate, tearing into the bread with desperate hunger. Ethan let her eat in peace, moving around the barn to tend to his 2 horses. He worked quietly, mucking stalls and filling water troughs, giving her time to recover herself. When she had finished eating, Rose spoke again. "My father and I were traveling to El Paso. He had a brother there, my uncle. We were supposed to meet him, start fresh. My father was a merchant in Louisiana, but after my mother died last year, he said there were too many memories. We needed a new beginning." Ethan listened as he brushed down his mare. "The Garrett brothers stopped our wagon 2 days outside of Fort Stockton," Rose continued, her voice growing steadier as she spoke, as if putting words to the nightmare helped make it real, helped her process it. "At first we thought it was just a robbery. My father gave them everything. All our money, our supplies, everything, but it was not enough. They wanted more. They wanted me." She paused, swallowing hard. "My father fought them. He tried to protect me. The youngest brother, Cyrus, he just pulled out his gun and shot my father in the chest. I screamed and ran to him, but he was already dead. Just like that. One moment he was alive, and the next he was gone." "I am sorry," Ethan said, and he meant it. He knew the pain of loss, knew how it could hollow you out from the inside. "They took me with them," Rose said. "Kept me tied up in their camp. I knew what they planned to do. I could see it in their eyes. But they were arguing about who would go first, and that argument bought me time. Last night they drank themselves stupid celebrating a robbery. That is when I ran." "You were brave," Ethan told her. "A lot of people would have given up." "I did not feel brave. I felt terrified. I still feel terrified." "That is what bravery is," Ethan said. "Being scared and doing it anyway." Rose looked at him, and something passed between them in that moment. A connection, fragile and new, but real. She had been alone for so long, had watched her father die, had been at the mercy of monsters. And here was this man, this stranger, offering her kindness without expectation, protection without condition. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not owe me anything," Ethan said firmly. "You just need to rest and heal. We will figure out the rest as we go." The day passed slowly. Ethan brought Rose more food and fresh water. He gave her a clean shirt and trousers to wear, clothes that had belonged to him and were far too big on her small frame, but at least they were not torn and bloodied. She changed behind a stall partition, grateful for the privacy. As the sun climbed higher, Ethan kept watch from the barn loft window. His ranch had a small house, the barn, a chicken coop, and a corral. He ran about 50 head of cattle, enough to make a modest living. It was not much, but it was his, and he had built it with his own 2 hands. Around midday, he saw riders in the distance, 5 of them moving along the main trail that ran past his property. His heart kicked hard in his chest, and he climbed down the ladder quickly. "Stay down and stay quiet," he told Rose. "We have got company." Her face went white, and she pressed herself back into the corner of the stall, pulling hay around herself to hide. Ethan grabbed his rifle and walked out to the front of his property, positioning himself by the split-rail fence that marked the boundary of his land. The riders approached slowly, and as they got closer, Ethan could make out their features. Hard men, all of them, with guns on their hips and meanness in their eyes. The oldest looked to be in his 40s, with a thick beard and a scar across his cheek. The youngest could not have been more than 20, but there was already a coldness to his face that spoke of a soul gone dark. They reined in their horses at the fence line, and the bearded man leaned forward in his saddle. "Morning," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "Morning," Ethan replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Something I can help you with?" "We are looking for someone, a girl, dark hair, early 20s, probably scared out of her mind. She stole a horse from us last night. You seen anyone like that?" Ethan shook his head. "No. Been here working my land all morning, have not seen anyone." The bearded man's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that? She was heading this direction? This is the only property for miles." "I am sure," Ethan said, his grip tightening on the rifle. "Like I said, I have not seen anyone." One of the other brothers, a man with greasy black hair and a thin mustache, spoke up. "Mind if we take a look around, just to be sure?" "I mind," Ethan said flatly. "This is my property. You do not have permission to be here." The bearded man's face hardened. "Now see, that is not very neighborly. We are just trying to recover what is ours." "A person cannot be owned," Ethan said, his voice dropping into a dangerous register. "And I have told you I have not seen anyone, so I suggest you move along." The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. The 5 brothers exchanged glances, and Ethan could see them weighing their options. They were armed, and they outnumbered him. But they were also out in the open, and Ethan had cover behind the fence and the house. If shooting started, they would take casualties. Finally, the bearded man grunted. "We will be back this way. If we find out you are lying, there will be consequences." "Noted," Ethan said coldly. The brothers wheeled their horses around and rode off, kicking up dust as they went. Ethan watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then waited another 10 minutes to be sure they were really gone before heading back to the barn. Rose was exactly where he had left her, buried in hay and shaking. When she saw him, relief flooded her face. "They came here?" "They came. They left. I sent them away." "They will come back," Rose said, her voice small and frightened. "They will not give up. They never give up. I heard them talking about other women they had taken. They always find them." Ethan knelt beside her, his expression serious. "Then we need a plan. We cannot just wait here for them to return with reinforcements. We need to get you somewhere safe." "Where?" Rose asked helplessly. "I do not know anyone in Texas. My uncle is in El Paso, but that is days away. And I do not even know if he's still there. For all I know, the Garrett brothers already got to him." Ethan thought for a moment. "Alpine has a sheriff, John Markham. He is a good man. We can go to him, tell him what happened, get the law involved." Rose shook her head frantically. "The law? The law did not stop them before. My father and I reported them in Fort Stockton after we heard about their crimes, and nothing happened. Those brothers have connections. They pay people off. The law will not protect me." She was probably right. Corruption ran deep in some of these frontier towns, and if the Garrett brothers had money, they could buy silence and looking the other way. Ethan cursed under his breath. Then we wait until dark and we ride for El Paso, he said. We move fast and quiet, stick to back trails. We can make it if we are careful. You would do that for me? Rose asked, searching his face. You would leave your ranch, risk your life for a stranger? You are not a stranger anymore, Ethan said simply. And yes, I would. I cannot stand by and let those men take you. I will not. Something shifted in Rose's expression, something soft and wondering. She reached out and her fingers brushed against his hand, a fleeting touch that sent warmth spreading through his chest. I do not understand why, she whispered. Why you are being so kind to me. Because it is the right thing to do, Ethan said. But even as he spoke the words, he knew there was more to it than that. There was something about Rose, something that called to him. Maybe it was her courage, the way she had survived horror and kept fighting. Maybe it was the vulnerability in her eyes, the way she looked at him like he was the answer to a prayer she had been too afraid to speak. Or maybe it was simply that in her he recognized a kindred spirit. Someone else who had lost everything and was trying to build something new from the ashes. We should rest while we can, Ethan said, standing. Tonight will be a hard ride. Rose nodded, curling back into the blanket. Despite her fear, exhaustion was pulling at her, and within minutes, she had drifted into an uneasy sleep. Ethan spent the rest of the day preparing. He packed saddlebags with supplies, loaded extra ammunition, and wrote a note to his neighbor, asking him to look after the cattle while he was gone. He did not say why he was leaving, just that it was urgent. Sam Jenkins was a good man and would not ask questions. As the sun began to set, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple, Ethan returned to the barn. Rose was awake, looking more rested, but still haunted. He handed her a gun belt with a small pistol. Do you know how to shoot? He asked, just a little. My father taught me. Good. Hopefully you will not need it, but better to have it. Rose strapped the belt around her waist, and even though the clothes were too big and she looked almost childlike in them, there was a fierce determination in her eyes that made Ethan's chest tighten. They waited until full dark, then led the horses out quietly. Ethan had saddled both his gelding and his mare, and he helped Rose mount up. She was sore and stiff from her ordeal, but she did not complain, just set her jaw and gathered the reins. We will ride through the night, Ethan said quietly, and stay close to me. If anything happens, you run. Do not stop. Do not look back. Just run. I am not leaving you, Rose said firmly. Rose. I said I am not leaving you, she repeated, her voice stronger now. You are risking everything for me. The least I can do is stand with you. Ethan wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes told him it would be pointless. So he just nodded and led the way into the darkness. They rode for hours, following narrow trails that wound through the hills. Ethan knew this country well, had spent years exploring every canyon and ridge. He kept them off the main roads, moving through territory that would be harder to track. The moon was high and bright, casting silver light across the landscape. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. This was wild country, a place where only the strong survived. But there was also a freedom here, a sense of possibility. People came west to escape their pasts, to reinvent themselves, to chase dreams that would have been impossible back east. It was dangerous, but it was also full of hope. Around midnight, they stopped to rest the horses and drink from a creek. Rose dismounted carefully, wincing as her muscles protested. Ethan filled their canteens while she walked along the creek bank, stretching her legs. How much farther to El Paso? She asked. At this pace, maybe 5 days. We will have to avoid towns where we can, which means slower going and longer routes. 5 days, Rose repeated. The weight of it settled on her shoulders. 5 days of running, of looking over her shoulder, of wondering if every shadow held danger. Ethan stepped up beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. We will make it, he said quietly. I promise you. You cannot promise that, Rose said, turning to look at him. In the moonlight, his face was all angles and shadows. You do not know what will happen. No, Ethan admitted, but I can promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, that I will not give up, that I will fight for you. Rose felt tears prick her eyes again. Why? She asked, her voice breaking. Why are you doing this? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. Why would you risk your life like this? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and gently touched her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender. Because from the moment I saw you in that barn, something in my chest just knew. I cannot explain it. But I knew that I could not let anything happen to you, that I would do whatever it took to protect you. Rose's breath caught. She stared up at him, and in his eyes she saw something that made her heart race. Not pity, not obligation, something deeper, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Ethan, she whispered. He leaned closer, and for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her. Her lips parted, and her heart thundered in her chest. But then he pulled back, clearing his throat. We should keep moving, he said roughly. The more distance we put between us and Alpine, the better. Rose nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment that washed through her. What was wrong with her? Her father had just died. She was running for her life. This was not the time to be feeling things for this man. And yet, she could not help it. In the midst of the worst nightmare of her life, Ethan Pierce had become her light, her anchor, the thing keeping her from falling apart completely. They mounted up and rode on through the night. As dawn began to break, they found a small canyon with good cover and decided to rest through the day, traveling again at night when they would be harder to spot. Ethan unsaddled the horses and let them graze while Rose spread blankets on the sandy ground. They ate dried meat and hardtack, washing it down with creek water. It was not much of a meal, but Rose barely noticed. She was exhausted, her body aching in places she did not know could ache. When she lay down on the blanket, she thought she would fall asleep immediately, but sleep would not come. Her mind kept replaying everything: her father's death, the Garrett brothers' cruel laughter, the desperate flight through the darkness. And then Ethan, his steady voice in the barn, the way he had wrapped the blanket around her, the promise in his eyes by the creek. Ethan, she said quietly. He was sitting a few feet away, his back against a rock, keeping watch. Yes? Will you tell me about yourself? I want to know who you are. Ethan smiled slightly. Not much to tell. I grew up in Missouri on a farm. My parents died of fever when I was 17. After that, I did not see much point in staying, so I came west, worked cattle drives, saved my money, and eventually bought my own piece of land in Alpine. Do you have any family left? A sister back in Missouri. Married with 3 kids. We write sometimes, but I have not seen her in years. Do you miss her? Sometimes, but this is my home now. Texas, the ranch. It is what I was meant to do. Rose rolled onto her side, looking at him. Do you ever get lonely? Ethan's eyes met hers, and something flickered there. Sometimes, he admitted. It is a solitary life, but I've always figured it was better than being with the wrong person. What would be the right person? Rose asked softly. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he said, someone brave, someone kind, someone who sees the world the way I do, someone who understands that life out here is hard, but that it is also beautiful, someone who would not give up when things got tough. Rose's heart squeezed. That sounds like a good person. It does, Ethan agreed. Then more quietly, what about you? Was there anyone back in Louisiana? No, Rose said. My mother wanted me to marry, kept introducing me to suitable young men, but none of them felt right. They all wanted me to be something I was not. Quiet and obedient and content to just be decorative. I wanted more. I wanted adventure, wanted to see the world, wanted to matter. You do matter, Ethan said firmly. You matter a great deal. Rose felt warmth spread through her chest. Thank you for saying that. It is not just words, it is the truth. They fell silent after that, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between two people who are starting to understand each other. Eventually, Rose's eyes drifted closed, and this time, sleep found her. Ethan watched her sleep, his chest tight with emotions he did not quite know how to name. He had told her the truth by the creek. From the moment he had seen her in that barn, something had shifted inside him. It was like a door had opened, letting light into places that had been dark for years. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself that he liked it that way. But watching Rose sleep, seeing the way her face finally relaxed into peace, he realized how much he had been missing, how much he had been denying himself. But this was not the time to think about such things. First, they had to survive. First, they had to get her to safety. After that, well, after that, they would see. The day passed slowly. Ethan dozed in shifts, always keeping one ear open for sounds of pursuit. But the canyon remained quiet except for the wind and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. As evening approached, they ate again and prepared to ride. Rose seemed stronger, more like herself. The rest had done her good, and there was color back in her cheeks. "How do you feel?" Ethan asked as he saddled the horses. "Better," Rose said. "Sore, but better. Thank you for stopping to rest. We have a long way to go yet. No point pushing ourselves to collapse." They rode out as the sun set, following the canyon westward. Ethan kept them moving at a steady pace, not too fast, not too slow. They had to conserve the horses' energy for the long haul. The second night passed much like the first. Quiet, tense, but uneventful. As dawn broke, they found another sheltered spot and made camp again. This time, when Rose lay down to sleep, Ethan found himself lying beside her, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body. It was not improper, he told himself. It was practical. They only had the 2 blankets, and the morning air was cold. But when Rose shifted in her sleep and curled against him, her head resting on his chest, Ethan could not deny the surge of feeling that washed through him. It was protective, yes, but it was also something more, something tender and fierce and entirely unexpected. He wrapped his arm around her carefully, holding her as she slept. And for the first time in years, Ethan Pierce did not feel alone. When Rose woke, she found herself pressed against Ethan's side, his arm around her shoulders. For a moment she considered pulling away, but it felt too good, too safe. So she stayed where she was, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You are awake," Ethan said quietly. "Yes," Rose murmured. "I am sorry. I did not mean to." "Do not apologize," Ethan said. "I do not mind." Rose tilted her head to look up at him, and their faces were suddenly very close. She could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could see the way his pulse jumped in his throat. "Ethan," she breathed. This time he did not pull away. This time he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she would pull away. But Rose did not pull away. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, and Rose felt something inside her unfurl, something that had been locked away for so long. It was not just desire, though there was that too. It was connection. It was hope. It was the feeling that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all this horror. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Rose," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I do not want to take advantage of you. You have been through so much, and I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything." "I do not feel that way," Rose said firmly. "I am kissing you because I want to. Because when I am with you, I feel safe. I feel like myself again. You have given me that, Ethan. You have given me back my life." "We still have days of travel ahead," Ethan said. "We are still in danger." "I know," Rose said, "but I also know what I feel. And I feel something for you, something real. Ethan kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. I feel it too, he admitted. I've never felt anything like this before. It scares me. Me too, Rose whispered. But I do not want to run from it. I have run from enough. They held each other for a long time, and when they finally pulled apart, there was an understanding between them. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The third night of travel brought them into rougher country. They were approaching the Guadalupe Mountains, and the terrain grew more challenging. Ethan navigated carefully, choosing paths that would leave minimal tracks. They were descending into a narrow ravine when Ethan suddenly held up his hand, signaling Rose to stop. She reined in her horse, her heart leaping into her throat. "What is it?" she whispered. "Campfire," Ethan said quietly, pointing ahead. In the darkness, about half a mile distant, Rose could see the flicker of flames. Could be anyone, might be nothing, but we should be careful. They dismounted and led the horses forward on foot, moving as silently as possible. As they got closer, they could hear voices, men's voices, rough and loud. Ethan motioned for Rose to stay back while he crept forward to get a better look. She waited, every muscle tense, her hand on the pistol at her hip. When Ethan returned, his face was grim. "It is them," he said quietly, on the Garrett brothers. "All 5 of them camped right in our path." Rose felt ice flood her veins. How is that possible? How did they get ahead of us? They must have guessed we were heading for El Paso and taken a faster route. They are waiting for us. "What do we do?" Rose asked, trying to keep the panic from her voice. Ethan thought quickly. "We backtrack and find another way around. It will add time, but we do not have a choice." They turned the horses and began retracing their steps, moving as quickly as they dared in the darkness. But they had only gone a few hundred yards when a voice rang out behind them. Well, look what we have here." Rose spun around, her hand flying to her gun, but before she could draw, rough hands grabbed her from behind. She had not heard anyone approach, and now it was too late. "Let her go!" Ethan shouted, drawing his own pistol. But there were too many of them. The Garrett brothers had split up, some waiting at the campfire while others circled around. Ethan found himself staring down the barrels of 3 guns. "Drop it," the bearded brother said, stepping into the moonlight. "Drop it, or we shoot her right now." Ethan's hand tightened on the grip of his pistol, every instinct screaming at him to fight, but he saw the gun pressed against Rose's temple, saw the terror in her eyes, and knew he did not have a choice. Slowly, he lowered his gun and dropped it on the ground. "Smart man," the bearded brother said, grinning. "Now, let us talk about this situation. You have got something that belongs to us." "She is not property," Ethan said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "She is a person. You have no right to her." "See, that is where you are wrong," the youngest brother, Cyrus, said. He was the one holding Rose, and he pressed the gun harder against her head, making her whimper. "We took her fair and square. She is ours, and you, Cowboy, made a big mistake interfering." "Let her go," Ethan said. "Take me instead. I have money back at my ranch. I will give you everything. Just let her go." The brothers laughed, cruel and mocking. "We do not want your money," the bearded one said. "We want what we want, and what we want is her. Though I am thinking now, maybe we will take you both. Make you watch what we do to her before we kill you. That sounds like fun." Rose cried out, struggling against Cyrus's grip. "Run, Ethan, just run." But Ethan did not run. He stood his ground, his mind racing, looking for any opening, any chance. And then, cutting through the darkness, came a voice. "I would not do that if I were you." Everyone froze. A man stepped out of the shadows, tall and broad-shouldered, with a star pinned to his chest. Behind him came 3 more men, all armed, all with the hard look of experienced lawmen. "Sheriff Markham," Ethan breathed, hardly believing his eyes. "Evening, Ethan," the sheriff said, his voice calm but his eyes hard. "Looks like you have gotten yourself into some trouble." "How did you—" Ethan started, but Markham cut him off. Your neighbor, Sam, came into town this morning. Said you had left suddenly, seemed spooked. I put 2 and 2 together when I heard about 5 men asking around for a missing girl. Figured you might be helping her, and figured you might need backup. So I deputized a few men, and we have been tracking you. The Garrett brothers had gone still, but Cyrus still held his gun to Rose's head. You do not have jurisdiction out here, Sheriff, he snarled. This is open country. Actually, Markham said, as it happens, I do, and you boys are wanted in 3 territories for robbery and murder, so here is how this is going to go. You are going to put your guns down nice and slow, and then you are going to come with me back to Alpine, where you will stand trial. Like hell, the bearded brother said, and he went for his gun. What happened next happened fast. Shots rang out, echoing off the canyon walls. Rose screamed as Cyrus's grip on her loosened, and she wrenched away from him. Ethan dove for his own gun, rolling and coming up firing. The sheriff and his men were shooting too, and in the chaos of muzzle flashes and shouting, it was hard to tell who was hitting what. When the smoke cleared, 3 of the Garrett brothers were down. The bearded one was clutching his shoulder, groaning. Cyrus was dead, a bullet through his chest. The other 2 were lying still. The remaining 2 brothers, seeing they were outgunned, threw down their weapons and raised their hands. Ethan scrambled to his feet and ran to Rose, who was crouched on the ground, her hands over her ears. He pulled her into his arms and she clung to him, sobbing. It is over, he murmured into her hair. It is over. You are safe. Sheriff Markham came over, holstering his gun. The girl all right? She will be, Ethan said. He pulled back to look at Rose, brushing her hair from her face. You are safe now. They cannot hurt you anymore. Rose looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, and nodded. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Markham cleared his throat. We will take these 2 back to Alpine to stand trial. The others, well, they made their choice. Miss, I will need you to come back and testify about what happened, about the murder of your father and your abduction. Rose straightened, wiping her eyes. Yes, of course. I want them to pay for what they did. Good, Markham said. Ethan, you and the lady can ride back with us. It will be safer with a group. The journey back to Alpine took 2 days. Rose gave her statement, and the surviving Garrett brothers were locked up awaiting trial. The town was abuzz with the news of the capture, and Ethan and Rose found themselves the subjects of much curiosity and speculation. Rose stayed at the boarding house in town, needing time to process everything that had happened. Ethan visited her every day, bringing her meals and sitting with her, letting her talk or cry or simply sit in silence. He did not push her, did not demand anything. He was just there, a constant, steady presence. A week after they returned, Rose knocked on the door of Ethan's ranch house. He opened it, surprise flickering across his face. Rose, I was just about to head into town to see you. I needed to come here, Rose said. I needed to see you. Really see you, not in some boarding house parlor with people watching. Ethan stepped aside, letting her in. His house was small and simple, but clean and well kept. There was a fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a bed in the corner. It was a bachelor's home, but Rose could see the potential in it, could see how it could become more. How are you feeling? Ethan asked, closing the door. Better, Rose said. The nightmares are still there, but they are getting less frequent. The sheriff says the trial will be next month. After that, I will be free to go. Go? Ethan asked, and Rose heard the tension in his voice. Go where? Rose turned to face him. That is what I came to talk to you about. Before all this happened, I was going to El Paso to be with my uncle, to start a new life. But now I am not sure that is what I want anymore. Ethan's breath caught. What do you want? Rose stepped closer to him, closing the distance between them. I want to stay here, in Alpine, with you, if you will have me. Rose, Ethan breathed, his hands coming up to cup her face. Are you sure? You have been through so much. I do not want you to make a decision you will regret. I am sure, Rose said firmly. These past weeks you have been my rock, my salvation. When I am with you, I feel like I can breathe again, like I can see a future. I do not want to walk away from that. I do not want to walk away from you." Ethan kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all the emotion he had been holding back into that kiss. When they broke apart, he was smiling, a wide, genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Then stay," he said. "Stay with me. Build a life with me. It will not be easy. This is hard country, and ranch life is not for everyone. But I will work every day to make you happy. I will love you with everything I have." "I know you will," Rose said, tears of joy streaming down her face, "because that is who you are. From the moment you found me in your barn, you have done nothing but protect me and care for me and show me what a good man looks like. I love you, Ethan Pierce. I think I started falling in love with you that very first morning when you wrapped me in a blanket and listened to my story without judgment." "I love you too," Ethan said. "I have loved you from the beginning, even when it did not make sense, even when I tried to tell myself it was just protectiveness or obligation. It was always more than that. It was always love." They stood in the middle of his small ranch house, holding each other, and Rose felt a peace settle over her that she had not felt since before her father died. She had lost so much, had endured horrors that would haunt her for the rest of her life, but she had also found something precious and rare. She had found love, real, true, unconditional love. Over the following weeks, Rose and Ethan settled into a routine. She moved out of the boarding house and into his ranch, and though it raised some eyebrows in town, they did not care. They were building something real, something that went beyond convention. Rose proved to be a natural rancher. She learned quickly, taking to the work with enthusiasm. She tended the chickens, helped with the cattle, and turned Ethan's bare house into a home. She sewed curtains for the windows and planted a garden. She cooked meals that filled the house with warmth and delicious smells. And at night they lay together in bed, holding each other, talking about their dreams for the future. They spoke of expanding the ranch, of maybe starting a family someday, of growing old together in this wild, beautiful country. The trial came and went. The surviving Garrett brothers were convicted and sentenced to hang. Rose testified, her voice strong and clear as she recounted everything that had happened. When the verdict was read, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Justice had been served. Her father could rest in peace. After the trial, Ethan took Rose into Alpine and bought her a ring. It was simple, just a silver band with a small stone. But to Rose, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. They were married in the small church in town, with Sheriff Markham and his wife as witnesses. As they stood before the preacher exchanging vows, Rose looked into Ethan's eyes and saw her future. She saw years of hard work and laughter and love. She saw children running through the ranch yard. She saw gray hair and wrinkled hands still clasped together. She saw a life worth living. "I do," she said, her voice ringing clear. "I do," Ethan echoed. And when he kissed her, Rose felt complete. The first year of their marriage was not easy. The ranch demanded constant work, and there were setbacks. A drought killed half their herd. A flash flood damaged the barn. But through it all, Ethan and Rose stood together, weathering each storm as a team. Rose wrote to her uncle in El Paso, explaining what had happened and her decision to stay in Alpine. He wrote back with his blessing and an invitation to visit whenever they could. She also wrote to Ethan's sister in Missouri, introducing herself. The sister's response was warm and welcoming, and she promised to come visit as soon as she could. As the seasons changed, Rose found herself changing too. The frightened girl who had hidden in the barn was gone, replaced by a strong woman who could handle a rifle as well as a skillet. She learned to ride like she had been born in the saddle. She learned to read the weather and the land. She became part of the fabric of Alpine, known for her kindness and her strength. In the spring of 1883, Rose discovered she was pregnant. She told Ethan one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "I am going to have a baby," she said quietly. Ethan went very still. Then he turned to her, his eyes wide with wonder. "A baby, are you sure?" "I am sure," Rose said, smiling. "The doctor in town confirmed it this afternoon." Ethan let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. When he finally did, he knelt before her and pressed his hands to her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I am your father, and I promise you, I am going to love you and protect you every day of your life. You're going to grow up knowing you are wanted and cherished. You are going to have the best mother in the world, and you are going to have a home filled with love." Rose felt tears slide down her cheeks as she looked down at her husband. This man who had saved her life, this man who had given her everything, this man who she loved more than she had ever thought possible. "We are going to be a family," she whispered. "We already are," Ethan said, looking up at her with eyes full of love. "We have been a family since that morning I found you in the barn. This baby is just making it official." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Rose continued to help around the ranch as much as she could, though Ethan fussed over her constantly, worried she was doing too much. She found his concern endearing, even when it bordered on overbearing. In December of 1883, during a cold snap that brought snow to the Texas hills, Rose went into labor. It was a long, difficult labor, and there were moments when Ethan feared he would lose her. But Rose was strong, stronger than he had ever known. And when the sun rose on a new day, their son was born. They named him Thomas, after Rose's father. He was a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs and a shock of dark hair. Ethan held him for the first time with shaking hands, staring down at the tiny face in awe. "He is perfect," Ethan breathed. "He is ours," Rose said, exhausted but radiant. "Our little miracle." Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for this, for him, for everything." Life with a baby was chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Thomas grew quickly, a happy child who laughed often and brought light into every corner of their home. Rose found that motherhood came naturally to her, and though she was often tired, she was also deeply fulfilled. Ethan proved to be a devoted father. He would wake in the night to help with feedings, would walk the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, would make silly faces to get him to smile. Watching him with their son, Rose fell in love with him all over again. The years passed, and their family grew. In 1886, they had a daughter they named Catherine, a beautiful child with Rose's dark hair and Ethan's brown eyes. In 1889, another son arrived whom they named Samuel after Ethan's neighbor who had inadvertently saved their lives by alerting the sheriff. The ranch prospered. Ethan and Rose worked hard expanding their herd and improving their property. They built a larger house with room for their growing family. They added a bunkhouse for the ranch hands they hired as the operation grew. What had started as a small, struggling ranch became one of the most successful operations in the area. But more important than the financial success was the love that filled their home. Ethan and Rose made sure their children knew they were treasured. They read to them every night, taught them about the land and the animals, instilled in them values of hard work and kindness and integrity. Rose never forgot the horror of what had happened to her, but she also never let it define her. She took the trauma and transformed it into strength, into compassion for others who were suffering. She became known in Alpine as someone who would help anyone in need, who would open her home to strangers, who would stand up for those who could not stand up for themselves. She and Ethan often talked about that morning in the barn, about how chance and fate had brought them together in the darkest moment of Rose's life. They marveled at how something so terrible had led to something so beautiful. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had made it to El Paso?" Ethan asked one night as they sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. "Sometimes," Rose admitted, "but I do not think it would have been as good as this. I think I was meant to end up here, with you. I think my father led me to your barn that night. I think he knew you would protect me. I hope he would be proud of you," Ethan said, "of the woman you have become, of the mother you are, of the life you have built." "I hope so too," Rose said softly. Then she smiled and took Ethan's hand. "But I know he would be grateful to you for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." Ethan raised her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I am the grateful one," he said. "You saved me too, Rose. I did not even realize how lonely I was until you came into my life. You filled all the empty spaces. You made me whole." As the sun set over their ranch, painting the Texas sky in shades of pink and gold, Rose leaned against her husband and felt nothing but peace. She thought about that terrified girl shivering in the barn, broken and afraid. She thought about the man who had wrapped her in a blanket and listened, who had seen past the fear to the person underneath. She thought about the journey they had been on together, the obstacles they had overcome, the love they had built. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Ethan's sister finally made the journey from Missouri with her family, and the reunion was tearful and happy. Rose's uncle came from El Paso, and though there was grief in seeing him without her father, there was also healing. Thomas grew into a strong, capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Catherine was spirited and bright, with a gift for horses. Samuel was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book, talking about becoming a teacher someday. In 1895, Thomas married a local girl, and Ethan and Rose became grandparents. Holding that first grandchild, Ethan found himself thinking back to that dawn morning when he had found Rose in his barn. If someone had told him then that 13 years later he would be standing in a house he built, surrounded by children and grandchildren, married to the woman of his dreams, he would not have believed it. But here he was, living proof that even in the darkest moments hope could be found. That love could heal even the deepest wounds, that from tragedy, beauty could emerge. As they grew older, Ethan and Rose took more time to simply enjoy each other's company. They would take long rides across the ranch, remembering the early days. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the stars come out. They would dance in the kitchen to no music, just swaying together, content in each other's arms. "Do you have any regrets?" Rose asked him one night as they lay in bed. Both of them gray-haired now, their faces lined with years of sun and work and laughter. "Not a single one," Ethan said. "Every choice I made led me to you, led us to this. How could I regret any of it?" "I feel the same, just joy," Rose said. She turned to face him, cupping his weathered cheek in her hand. "You know, I think about that morning sometimes, how cold I was, how terrified, how certain I was that I was going to die, and then you appeared, and everything changed." "You were so brave," Ethan said. "Even then, broken and scared, you were the bravest person I had ever met." "I did not feel brave." "Bravery is not the absence of fear," Ethan said, echoing words he had spoken to her so long ago. "It is being terrified and doing it anyway. You did that. You survived. You fought. You built this life. That is bravery." Rose smiled and kissed him softly. "We built this life," she corrected. "Together." "Together," Ethan agreed. As they drifted off to sleep that night, wrapped in each other's arms the way they had been for more than 20 years, both of them felt deeply, profoundly grateful. Grateful for that terrible morning that had brought them together. Grateful for every moment since. Grateful for the love that had sustained them through everything. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, and eventually Catherine married a neighboring rancher's son, expanding their network of family and friends. Samuel did indeed become a teacher, opening a school in Alpine and dedicating his life to educating the next generation. Ethan and Rose lived to see all their children married and happy, lived to see grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. They lived to see the turn of the century, lived to see the Wild West they had known gradually transform into something more settled and civilized. But through all the changes, their love remained constant. It was the foundation on which everything else was built. It was the thing that sustained them through loss and hardship. It was the thing that made every joy sweeter. On a spring morning in 1908, Rose woke to find Ethan already awake beside her, staring at her with an expression of such tenderness that it took her breath away. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking," Ethan said, "about how lucky I am. To have had all these years with you, to have built this life, to have loved you every single day." "I am the lucky one," Rose said. "You saved my life, Ethan, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Ethan said. He pulled her close, and they lay there in the morning light, two old souls who had weathered every storm together. That afternoon they took a ride out to the spot where their house used to stand, where the old barn still remained, though it was weathered and worn now. They dismounted and walked inside, and Rose felt a wave of emotion wash over her. "This is where it all started," she said softly. "Right here." "Best morning of my life," Ethan said. "The morning I found you." "The morning you wrapped me in a blanket and listened," Rose added. "The morning you saw me as a person, not a problem or a burden. The morning you chose to help me, even though it would have been easier to turn away." "I could never have turned away from you," Ethan said. "From that first moment, I knew you were special. I knew you were going to change my life." "We changed each other's lives," Rose said. She looked around the barn, at the stall where she had hidden, at the spot where Ethan had draped the blanket around her shoulders. So much had happened since that morning. So much life had been lived. They spent the rest of the afternoon there talking about memories, laughing about the early days when they were figuring out how to be married, marveling at how far they had come. When the sun began to set, they rode back to the ranch house where their family was gathering for dinner. The table was loud and chaotic, filled with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Rose looked around at all the faces, all the love, and felt her heart swell. This was her legacy, not just the ranch or the land, but this family. These people who existed because she had survived, because Ethan had helped her, because they had chosen each other. After dinner, as the family gathered around the fireplace, one of the grandchildren asked, "Grandma, will you tell us the story of how you and Grandpa met?" Rose and Ethan exchanged glances, and then Rose began to speak. She told them about the journey west with her father, about the terrible men who had taken her, about the desperate flight in the darkness. She told them about finding Ethan's barn, about how cold and scared she had been. "And then your grandfather appeared," Rose said, her eyes finding Ethan's across the room. "He could have chased me away, could have turned me into those men to save himself, but he did not. He wrapped me in a blanket and listened to my story. He saw me as a human being deserving of kindness and protection. And from that moment, my life began again." The children listened with wide eyes, captivated by the story they had heard many times but never tired of. When Rose finished, the oldest grandson spoke up. "Grandpa, were you scared?" "Terrified," Ethan admitted. "I knew that helping your grandmother would put me in danger, but I also knew I could not live with myself if I turned her away. Some things are more important than safety. Love is one of those things." "You did not love her yet, though," the grandson pointed out. "You had just met her." "That is true," Ethan said, "but I think part of me knew even then that she was going to be the most important person in my life. Call it fate or instinct or just plain luck. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every day." Rose stood and crossed the room to sit beside her husband. He put his arm around her, and she leaned into him, still fitting perfectly against his side after all these years. "The moral of the story," Rose said to her assembled family, "is that love can come from the darkest places, that kindness matters, that choosing to help someone, even when it is hard or scary, can change everything. Your grandfather saved my life, and in doing so, he gave all of you life. Remember that. Remember that how we treat people matters. That compassion is never wasted. That love is the most powerful force in the world. As the evening wore on and the family gradually dispersed to their various homes, Ethan and Rose found themselves alone again. They walked out onto the porch, looking up at the stars that blanketed the Texas sky. "We have had a good life," Rose said. "The best life," Ethan agreed. "I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I." They stood there in comfortable silence, two people who had loved each other through everything, who had built something beautiful and lasting from the ruins of tragedy. Around them, the ranch was quiet, settled for the night. In the distance, cattle lowed softly. A breeze whispered through the grass. "Do you remember what you said to me that first morning?" Rose asked, "when I asked why you were helping me?" "I said it was the right thing to do," Ethan replied. "No, after that. You said that from the moment you saw me, something in your chest just knew, that you could not explain it, but you knew you could not let anything happen to me." "I remember," Ethan said softly. "It was the truth. It still is." "I felt it too," Rose admitted. "Even in my fear, even in my grief, there was this sense that you were safe, that I could trust you, that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right." "And was it?" Ethan asked, though he knew the answer. "It was better than all right," Rose said. She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "It was everything. You gave me everything, Ethan Pierce. A home, a family, a reason to keep going. Love that sustained me through the hardest days and made the good days even better. You took a broken girl shivering in a barn and helped her become who she was always meant to be." "You did that yourself," Ethan said. "I just had the privilege of being there to witness it." "We did it together," Rose insisted. "Everything we have, we built together." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I love you, Rose Pierce. I have loved you since that dawn morning, and I will love you until my last breath." "I love you too," Rose whispered. "Always." They stood there on the porch as the night deepened around them, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and had built a life filled with light. Behind them, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with the echoes of laughter and love. Before them, the land stretched out, wild and beautiful, a testament to everything they had overcome and achieved. In the end, their story was simple. A cowboy found a woman shivering in his barn at dawn. He wrapped her in a blanket and listened. And from that single act of kindness, from that choice to see her humanity and protect it, came a love that would span decades, came a family that would carry their legacy forward, came a life that was rich with meaning and purpose and joy. Years later, when both Ethan and Rose had passed on, their children and grandchildren would continue to tell the story. They would speak of that cold April morning in 1882, of a frightened girl and a compassionate cowboy, of a love that had changed everything. They would remember the lessons their grandparents had taught them about kindness and courage and the transformative power of love. The ranch would continue through the generations, a living monument to Ethan and Rose Pierce. And on quiet mornings, when the dawn light filtered through the old barn, some family members swore they could still feel their presence there, could still sense the love that had started in that very spot and had grown to encompass so much. Because love like that does not die. It lives on in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It lives on in the stories that are told and retold. It lives on in the kindness that people show to strangers, in the courage to help even when it is hard, in the belief that one person can make a difference. Ethan Pierce found Rose Sullivan shivering in his barn at dawn. He wrapped her in a blanket and listened. And in doing so, he changed both their lives forever. It was a simple act, but it was also everything. It was the beginning of a love story that would echo through time, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can be found, that choosing compassion over fear can change the world. That love, real and true and enduring, is always worth fighting for. Their story became legend in Alpine, Texas, passed down through generations as an example of what love should be. Not easy or perfect, but real. built on a foundation of kindness and trust and mutual respect, sustained through hardship and celebrated in joy. A love that started with a simple choice to help a stranger and grew into something that touched countless lives. And so the story ends where it began, in that old barn on a Texas ranch, where a frightened woman found safety and a lonely man found purpose, where two people who should have been strangers became soulmates, where against all odds love triumphed over darkness and built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. In the end, that is what love does. It transforms, it heals, it endures. And the love between Ethan and Rose Pierce did all of that and more, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary things can come from the simplest acts of human kindness.